Maddie, what excites you the most about the future of genomics, especially if we get the diversity question right?
What I'm hoping for is that we're going to have a ChatGPT moment for genomics.
Imagine this. Two people walk into a hospital. One gets a treatment that works like magic. The other, nothing happens. Same symptoms, same diagnosis, but completely different outcomes. Why? Because what's written in our DNA is as unique as a fingerprint. And the problem? The science we rely on, the research, the data, the trials, has been built on just a few fingerprints, while billions of others are invisible.
What is the genetic ancestry of open access genetic data? At that point, 95% were European.
In a world where genomics is becoming the blueprint for everything from diagnosing disease to developing life-saving drugs, we need to ask, why do most genomic databases only represent people of European ancestry? What happens when entire populations are missing from the data?
DNA is a wondrous new tool that tells us about our susceptibility in terms of inheriting and then passing on diseases.
And to help us navigate it, I'm joined by someone who's been at the heart of this mission. He's a geneticist, a global advocate, and a senior lecturer in genomics at the University of Westminster, Dr. Manuel Corpas.
My mission is really to bridge health equity, health disparities across different ancestries. The right for the right patient, the right time, in the right dose. As a scientist, I can't assume that what I do is necessarily going to be trusted. I need to build trust.
Are we at a risk of building a future of medicine that only works for a narrow slice of global population?
Yes, we are, but that doesn't mean that's gonna be like that forever. I used to admire America. I don't admire it today, unfortunately.
Tell me more. Two people walk into a hospital. One gets a treatment that works like magic. The other, nothing happens. Same symptoms, same diagnosis, but completely different outcomes. Why? Because what's written in our DNA is as unique as a fingerprint. And the problem? The science we rely on, the research, the data, the trials, has been built on just a few fingerprints, while billions of others remain invisible. In today's conversation, we're talking about something that doesn't just affect science, it affects fairness, representation, and the very future of healthcare. Whose genes are we studying and whose are we ignoring? In a world where genomics is becoming the blueprint for everything, from diagnosing disease to developing life-saving drugs, we need to ask, why do most genomics databases only represent people of European ancestry? What happens when the entire populations are missing from that data? And how do we fix a system that might be brilliant but dangerously incomplete? This isn't a conversation just for scientists. This is a conversation for anyone who cares about health, equity, and the future of medicine. And to help us navigate it, I'm joined by someone who has been at the heart of this mission. He's a geneticist, a global advocate, a senior lecturer in genomics at the University of Westminster. He has led initiatives across Europe and Latin America, spoken on international stage, and challenged the way we think about inclusion, not just in society, but in science itself. He's passionate about spotlighting the underrepresented, building trust with indigenous communities, and shaping a world where your genes don't determine your level of care simply because of where you come from. Please welcome to Drug Diaries the brilliant and inspiring Dr. Manuel Corpas. Manuel, welcome to Drug Diaries.
Thank you, Kaushik. I'm really grateful to be here with you today. And yeah, as you were saying those words, I was getting absolutely, I was feeling the firing inside. Like, you've put it really well, although perhaps a bit too generously. But yeah, I mean, let's say that what you said about me is my aspiration.
That's it. You are, Manning. And to begin with, Manuel, before we talk about your research, take us back. How did your journey in genomics begin? Was there a specific moment or experience that pulled you into this world?
Right, this is gonna get personal, okay? I'm sure your audience will like that. Yeah, so I'm a bioinformatician by training, and
that means that I use computers to analyze massive data sets applied to biological problems. After I finished my PhD, I was headhunted by a sort of agency to work at the Sanger Institute, which is located in Cambridge, UK, and it was the biggest contributor to the Human Genome Project. That massive wonder of the 21st century, where you had this amazing global collaboration with China, with US, European countries, and it produced the most wondrous map that we can think of, the map of our human genome. And that map locates every single gene that makes us human. It puts them specific coordinates. So after I was headhunted by that agency, I ended up working in an amazing project called Deciphering Developmental Diseases, which at the time was a living project worldwide on diagnosis of patients with rare genomic disorders. So I'm sure you've heard of many people that are born with congenital abnormalities. So most of them go undiagnosed, or used to go undiagnosed, because we just simply didn't have the tools, nor the maps, nor the resolution to be able to really understand the changes that cause those illnesses. And so I was involved. I was, truly by chance, involved in one of the pioneering projects on mapping and understanding the extent to which genomics data can then be used for diagnosis of patients with rare genomic disorders. That we are talking about 2008. So I've been since 2008, 100% working on trying to understand. Actually, that I'm still researching the same question. My main question, my main obsession, should I say, hasn't changed, and is to try to understand the extent to which our DNA can influence, can help improve our health. And very early on, as I was developing this technical infrastructure to help analyze these patients, I realized how difficult it was, even for those who were working in the field, for clinicians themselves. I had to explain them very, very carefully all the time, because it is incredibly data intensive. I mean, every one human genome with current data, it can fill a hard drive or in terms of the volume, the size volume that you can get of data. So, and I saw very clearly then, this is not just going to be for patients with rare genomic disorders. This is going to be for everyone, because everyone has a genome, and all of us have, mutations that will influence our susceptibility to diseases, our ability to metabolize drugs, our ability to have specific disorders, things like autoimmune diseases. So all of that has a reflection in the genes that all of us carry. These genes is not our genes. We share them with our relatives. At the end of the day, we are all related through our DNA. That power is something that we didn't have 20 years ago, which we now have. Now, I always say, the DNA is not a magic crystal ball that is going to tell you your future, okay? Mm-hmm. DNA is a wondrous new tool that tells us about our susceptibility in terms of inheriting and then passing on diseases. And all diseases have a genetic component. It's not all of the sort of causes that diseases have. Some diseases are more genetic based. For instance, type 1 diabetes is quite genetic. But then there are others which are, the genetic contribution is not so great. Like, for instance, skin cancer. So if you don't take sunbathe, you're not likely to have, skin cancer. At least some types of skin cancer. So My passion since then has been, how do we bring this to everyone? How do we actually have ordinary people, regardless of socioeconomic status? How do we, this is universal, right? Because all human beings have it. Therefore, the reach has to be universal. And because of that, I feel very strongly driven to make sure that that's the case.
Right. And you've spoken at countless events and published widely. But if you had to sum up your mission in one sentence, what would it be?
My mission is really to bridge health equity, health disparities across different ancestries. And that's what I've been working on, especially full time for the past few years. And then, make sure that the ideal of precision medicine, that is the right drug for the right patient, the right time, in the right dose, that is actually happening for everyone, regardless of their origin, regardless of where they come from, regardless of their socioeconomic status.
Right. And Manny, let's start with the uncomfortable truth. We talk about precision medicine, but how precise can it really be if most data sets exclude entire populations?
Yeah, so that's not precision medicine according to my standard. We cannot have precision medicine if it's only going to benefit the few. So that's by definition. Therefore, we don't have precision medicine if that precision medicine is based on data sets which have been originated in specific populations. That's not to say that there has been an active effort to try to, discourage or avoid specific populations. It's a matter of where the finances and the research and the necessary infrastructure to be able to develop this type of technologies have happened in, the Northern Hemisphere, basically.
Right.
And so the closer you are to Northern white European males, the likelier that the precision medicine advancements are going to work better for you.
Right.
And that is the simple truth of where we are at. In a world where, with AI, again, it's the same. If you think about where AI has been able to have better discrimination or better classification power, it has been with white male Northern Europeans. So I think we are again in the same situation where the sort of entrenchment of the historical disparities continue to perpetuate across the different fields that are based on data intensive sources such as precision medicine. Because if we talk about precision medicine, that's really what it is. It's big data driven medicine. Is the response of digitization and massive data within the medical field, as it has happened in fintech, with the financial service, with the other fields. All of them has been digitized, and they all have been. Not, I can think of the travel industry, right, or e-commerce. So all of these things have been digitized, transformed, and it doesn't matter so much. We don't see those disparities, although there are, but where it really hurts is medicine, because that's now affecting all of us.
Right. And how did you first come across the lack of diversity in genomics, and what impact does that have on the science we create and the people we serve?
I have always been acutely aware of disparities. As an immigrant myself to the United Kingdom, I know what it is to be slightly different, not speak with the same or with foreign accent. I mean, I'm not saying that I've ever been discriminated, but there are still. So I guess I've always been acutely aware of being different. It doesn't help the fact that I'm also kind of neurodivergent. I think I'm probably in the autism spectrum, so I'm hypersensitive to differences, and so I guess I'm genetically wired to be oversensitive to disparities. And at the end of the day, So the first time I really published about that was in 2017. Where what I did, you may have heard of this company called 23andMe that unfortunately now has gone bankrupt. That they were the pioneering direct-to-consumer genetic testing company. So basically, for $100, you will spit on a test tube, you send it somewhere in the US, and then they give you a nice online report on things like ancestry and then specific traits. I'm not saying that it's necessarily useful. Certainly, it's not useful in the clinical context, but it has been incredibly useful in terms of raising awareness of genetics for the general public. And I think that 23andMe was tremendously good at presenting results in a way that was understandable by the general public. So they were very good at wrapping results, scientifically complex results. So at that time, I was, to be honest, my family was one of the first, probably the first family actually, that put their whole genomes on the internet for public download. So I was already experimenting with pushing the boundaries of what would be possible. And among those, then I was also scraping through the whole of the internet, anyone who would have put their genetic data for research purposes available on the internet. At the time, I was able to download every open access genetic profile from anyone who had 23andMe data. And at that point, I was the first time where I had hard data, because, by looking at your genetics, you can really very, very accurately deduce your ancestry.
Right.
So even though I only had numbers, I didn't know who the people were, but I ended up with about 3,000 open access genetic profiles from people, anyone around the world. And at that point, I sort of, okay, let's interpolate what is the genetic ancestry of open access genetic data. At that point, 95% were European.
Wow.
95%.
Wow. That's a huge.
So that was the first time where, and I just bumped into that because I was just curious to see, this is kind of cool. I want to learn about the data that is out there. And that at that point, that was the beginning of everything for me. When I thought this can't be good. This can't be something that, is acceptable if we are operating under the principles of really seeking the truth. And the truth doesn't segregate. The truth doesn't divide. The truth joins us. And it's kind of funny to say that in the post-truth era, but yes, I'm actually that's what I truly believe. So felt again the fire inside, saying, this is not possible. And so that was the beginning. I've been working on this since 2017.
Right. And you've done some amazing work highlighting the gaps in Latin America and among indigenous populations. What have you learned from engaging directly with these communities?
That it's very different to do science than to actually talk to the people who are in the field in real life. So it's been an eye opener for me. And it's, if anything, it's made me even more passionate about bringing down any barrier that will separate us as human beings. Because people in the Amazon jungle, they also care about their children. They also, they want to have access to healthcare.
Yes.
They have their own traditional medicine, but they can't cure. They don't have access to operations. They don't have access to, the type of medical advancements that we will have in an industrialized country. I've faced quite a bit of criticism as well. Like, why should you be contacting them? Are they not happy with what they have? And, it is them who want us to help them. They were asking us, please, can you give us new medicines? Please, can you help us, because we can't, we only can calm the symptoms. We cannot cure.
Right.
So I'm not saying that this will be universal, but at least with the few indigenous populations I've encountered, in the middle of the jungle, talking to us, barely talking a little bit of Spanish, but then, within their own language as well. So just being there, seeing it, I guess it's a little bit like when people go on the space and then they see the planet Earth from above. Your perspective about everything changes.
Yes.
And that has happened to me, to be honest.
Right. Are we at a risk of building a future of medicine that only works for a narrow slice of global population?
Yes, we are. And to be honest, in a way, it's already happening. But that doesn't mean that it's late for bridging those gaps. It doesn't mean that that's going to be like that forever. And it doesn't mean that, we should accept it. We already see very tangible examples where people from underrepresented populations, they're suffering the consequences of not having being studied as much. I'm going to give you one example.
Sure.
So warfarin is the most prescribed anticoagulant in the world.
Yes.
Okay. And as it happens, in people from African ancestry, 1 in 4 people who have warfarin have adverse drug reactions. So it's among the top adverse drug reaction problems or medicines that are given in Africa. It's one of the greatest problem in terms of adverse drug reactions. But that doesn't happen in Europeans because there are already algorithms that are able to very accurately predict who's going to have adverse drug reactions if you are of European origin. But that doesn't, if you are not of European origin, those algorithms don't. So that's one simple example where the actual underrepresentation is affecting health of real people. So it's not just a question of making sure that we have a proportional representation of data from people in different regions of the world in public data sets. It's a question that we have to have all of the diversity mapped, and some regions are more diverse than others. And my main message on the issue of underrepresentation and health equity is that we don't even have a clear target to aim at, because there are no metrics on saying, is this diverse enough? Is this not diverse enough? Depending on what data source you look at, if you look at, for instance, clinical trials, the classification of ancestries, they call it ethnicities. I don't like to use the word ethnicity because it's loaded, but they call it ethnicities. So their classification of ethnicities in the FDA is very different from the classification of biogeographical regions that are used for pharmacogenomics, or that is the drug gene reactions. It's very different from the classifications in genomic studies. So we cannot even agree how to compare or what the different levels should be depending on the different type of data that we are working with.
Right.
So it's incredibly fragmented. Some populations are completely absent. For instance, Oceanians, and by that I mean original people from the Australian continent, for instance. Last time I looked, there's zero data in pharmacogenomics, in the drug gene reactions. And we know that they have a much higher rate of illness than the other people, than the European descent of Australians. So there are incredible disparities at the moment. So my approach has been, okay, I don't have the money to be able to sequence the whole world. I don't have the capacity to influence the FDA or whatever, but I can at least point out at the holes. But at least I can identify, where the disparities are, and what the problems are in terms of the data representation. As I said, lack of standards, lack of metrics, and then our inability to agree on what diversity is, because depending on who is talking to is going to have their own definition of diversity. Everyone is talking about diversity, but we don't have a clear target on what diversity, what inclusion should be. And I'm very much, now in these champion times, yes, equity, diversity, and inclusion, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it's necessary. Okay, it's not discriminatory. On the contrary, it's inclusive.
And let's talk about bias, not just in algorithms, but in our assumptions. How does ancestry and sex bias sneak into genomic research, even with good intentions?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I never doubt that the scientific people have good intentions. So basically, if you have mostly males developing specific research, then they're just simply not gonna be aware of things to do, for instance, with menopause, or things to do with pregnant women. One of the big gaps that we have identified is that there's no data for pregnant women. Of course, because it's unsafe. You cannot test drugs, but then you cannot test that drugs with women, but for safety reasons. And then that's why you see a lot of the time, pregnant women, please don't take this medicine, or don't take this drink or whatever. But of course, that's a gap. Then the other thing that we have found is that women live longer and they have greater chances of things that we call polypharmacy. So they can be prescribed more than one medicine at the same time, and those medicines may interact with each other and hence produce unexpected collateral effects.
Right.
And we see that with women, for instance. Now, in terms of ancestral biases, well, I mean, you try to put the whole of Africa under one label, and Africa has more diversity than the rest of the world combined. Right. So people who are geographically quite close in some countries in Africa, they are genetically distant as much as it could be between Spain and China. And we see that. So the sort of limits or the classifications, they have been with Western way of thinking. The same way that Western powers draw the boundaries in different countries, and then you have some, the Kurds, right? They're divided into Iraq, Turkey, and Syria, but they're actually a people, and perhaps they should have their own country. I don't know, but something like that happens in the current delineation of the different groups, and as a consequence, then those groups that fall through the cracks, they suffer the consequence of bias and the representation more than others.
And what does ethical and inclusive genomic science look like to you?
So I'm an incredibly technical person in the sense that I've got a PhD in computer science, and I'm a computational guy. And I always say that actually we are thinking too little about the non-technical things. That is public engagement, raising awareness, the social aspects, the ethics. I think we need to spend a lot more time thinking and dedicating resources on the humanity side of the aspects that we are doing research on. I always say that if I was going to just say very, very quickly, is public, engagement with the communities that we are trying to serve, because since my visit to them in these remote places, you can't really serve their needs if you don't know them. If for you they are just a number, or they're just a name, you can have the great intention to help them, but we need to think a lot more about their own cultural sensibilities, their own values. What we think is correct in our Western society is not necessarily correct for them. I see that in particular with many indigenous communities who just simply don't want to have their DNA analyzed, because it's for it's their own. Well, on the one hand, there's a lot of distrust for historical reasons, and then what's the point on analyzing one's DNA when they have more pressing problems, addiction to substances, or
Yes.
they don't have jobs, or sanitation. So I think there has to be a lot more engagement. There has to be a lot more from us scientists. We need to build the trust.
Yes.
We can't count on the fact that just because we are doing this that we think is good is necessarily going to be accepted as good by them. So as a scientist, I can't assume that what I do is necessarily going to be trusted. I need to build trust, and that's absolutely essential. I want to put that at the forefront of what a scientist should be in the 21st century,
Right.
second decade or third decade, where we are right now. We need to, and it's our duty, because we are at the forefront, at the frontier of knowledge. Then we really need to be aware of the fact that carries a responsibility, and hopefully we all can, if we discuss this, if we bring it to the fore, we all be able to be better at it.
Right. Manny, so much of what you do is about advocacy and visibility. Have you seen any positive shifts, like places where diversity is finally being taken seriously in research agenda?
Definitely. I mean, since I've been working on this, it has been in the agenda of pretty much every initiative that I've been working on. For instance, we always make sure that if we organize an event, that there's gender balance, that there is geographical balance. So we need to balance the global north with the global south. So the awareness is there. What is not there so much is the business case, and I think we really need to work on the business case as to why equity, diversity, and inclusion is good for genetic analysis, not just for the underrepresented populations, but for the represented populations as well. And I have examples where I can really say that bridging the gap helps everybody, because things that we think are pathogenic in the European populations, then we've had a number of examples where we have seen in some isolated communities in Africa, 20% carrying that mutation, which was meant to be pathogenic in Europeans. So and that basically is a contradiction, because one of the main sort of criteria for establishing whether a mutation is pathogenic or not is if they are very low frequency. So if you have very low numbers of potentially a disrupting mutation in an important gene, then it's more likely to be pathogenic. But if you are only observing European data sets, then you're going to find some low frequency things that, in other populations, you observe them. And when in higher frequencies. So in those cases, those are definitely not going to be pathogenic, because then, 20% of the population couldn't carry something that will have severe consequences. So there are clear examples where I can say, this is not just for the underrepresented, is for everyone. In the same way, precision medicine, precision medicine is not just for the few. Precision medicine is for everyone, and I cannot conceive precision medicine just being for the few, because that's not precision medicine.
If you could wave a wand and change one thing about how the global genomics community operates, what would that be? It's a hypothetical question.
I've never asked this question before. If I was going to change anything about genomics, if I was going to start everything about genomics, I genuinely say, obviously, I've got my friend who is in Latin America, and he says, well, if DNA had been discovered in Peru, all of our mutations wouldn't be rare, and the European mutations would be the ones that are rare. Yeah. So that would be one of the things that we could change. But at the same time, how could we have avoided all of these biases? In the global perfect world, maybe, but it's the way the real world operates, where it's all about innovation, about investment and research, and centuries of research, tradition of. So I guess the thing that I would have changed is the eugenic movement. So this thing that different races have, some races are genetically superior than others, and that's very clear. And unfortunately, this is one of the topics that still very much today on, because race. Have you noticed that this is the first time in this interview when I've talked about race? I haven't talked about race before.
You haven't.
Because race, it's a social construct. It's not a biological thing. It's biologically speaking, from the genetics point of view, there's no correlation. There's no good correlation between race and genetics. Okay. That's not to say that there are adaptations. We know that there are adaptations to high altitude. People in the Tibet, they can, breathe much better than myself. Some populations in Indonesia, they can swim for 10, 15 minutes. I can't do that. People in the West, in Western European, they have lactase. We can drink milk as adults. Many people in the world can do that. And so there have been genetic changes that have accumulated as a consequence of environmental pressures. So that is a fact. Now, whether that you use that and then try to apply to things that are measured at a society level, IQ and all of these things, is absolutely nonsense. So that's probably one of the things that, as genetics itself as a field is still tainted because of that, and we need to be really, really careful. And every time that someone tries to use genetics in the sense of white supremacy or whatever you want to call it, or any kind of racism supremacy, that's absolutely a load of rubbish.
And we hear about this 100,000 genome project that was done in the UK, and is that somehow related to addressing the lack of diversity of genome data?
So the 100,000 Genomes project started in 2013 as a consequence of David Cameron's initiative to bring genetics at the point of care, whole genome sequencing, that is the analysis of all genomes at the point of care. It has been a transformative project, and it has put the UK at the center of, and as a world leader on how to bring whole genome sequencing to the clinical setting. So, and the UK has been incredibly open to share it with anyone who had minimum credentials, scientific credentials, regardless of where they come from, regardless of, you know, any kind of, the only filter was, is this person genuine in terms of their activities, and is this person going to follow our ethical procedures to make sure that our patient population's identities is completely protected. So to me, that is incredible in terms of democratizing genomics. Now, well, the UK depends on how you measure it, but the UK is somewhere between 90 to 95% white British, or just white European, right? So Genomics England is just a reflection of that. So, but that's not to say that there have been a lot of efforts to make sure that the different diverse communities were represented, and increasingly so. There's the new project called Our Future Health, which you might have heard of, a new massive project from the UK government together with NHS. They're going to basically have the genetic profiles of 5 million people, and combined with the electronic health records from the NHS for people who are voluntary and who have accepted to be part of this. And I know that they have a tremendous drive to maximize representation from diverse groups. But at the end of the day, it is what it is, right? The UK has that genetic composition. So that's the kind of reflection. And I know that they're trying to actually have less of what we have and more of what we don't have. But still, those biases are going to exist. But again, I just want to say that the UK, even if those data sets are not balanced in terms of the global ratio of populations from all over the world, the effect that it has made, the fact that anyone in India, anyone even in China, US, Paraguay, they can have access to the data. So even if the data is biased, the fact that you are giving access to bona fide research from anywhere in the world, I think that's a great step in terms of making precision medicine more equitable.
Maddie, what excites you the most about the future of genomics, especially if we get the diversity question right?
What I'm hoping for is that we're going to have a ChatGPT moment for genomics. I don't think that has happened. I don't think that we've been in a real situation where there's a clear, easy, and fast response for this technology for the ordinary public. That hasn't happened. And I believe that it will happen. It will happen because of AI. And it hasn't happened because regardless of all this advancement, actually, we know very, very little about our genes. We know so little about our biology, about drugs, about diseases, about how we age. We know so little because the complexity of biology overwhelms us.
Yeah.
The biology is always getting more and more complex. As we go deeper, it gets more and more complex. So we thought that just by having the map of the human genome that, suddenly we'll have all diseases, causes. But then as we go into the genome, then we find, oops, actually there's also an epigenome and the proteome and the transcriptome and the and all of these systems interconnected at different levels of organization, which are having a real effect on the function of the cell, of the tissue, and the organ, and the individual, and the species. So that is the reality of how nature works. It's a lot more complicated than language, even though large language models have now cracked the language. So we still need to crack the language of life.
Right.
And I hope, and I know that this will happen.
Right. If we do nothing, where do you see this going in 10 years?
If we do nothing in terms of genomics, well, I see people carrying the few carrying their whole genome in their iPhone, everywhere, and sharing their data cloud with their personal practitioners, whatever, with their clinician, all their wearables data, all of the sort of sets of measurements that have been accumulated about someone's health given at the point of care. And then they have nots, well, without that. So, if we do nothing, we're going to have diverging life expectancy, not just between countries, but within countries. So we're gonna get more and more people living healthier for longer. The people who have money, they're gonna live a lot more than people who don't have money,
Right.
or who cannot afford it, or who are not in the right place. That's what's gonna happen. It's happening, and it will exacerbate through the exponential technological advancements that are happening right now. Yeah, how things are changing in technology, and of course the merging of AI with biology.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically going to have, unless we try to do something, there are going to be massive differences, inequalities.
Right. And what's your view on all these labs that are becoming more and more accessible, where you can get yourself tested? Recently, I was at Whitefield Shopping Center, and on the ground floor, they have this little cubicle where you can get yourself tested for a couple of £100, and they've also got another type of tests where you can check for any deficiencies. You can just get a drip right there if you find something missing. What do you think about those tests?
I guess one has to be cautious, because there's a lot of snake oil out there. A little bit like the supplements, right? So you can buy any kind of supplement you can think of. And the reality is that many of them, don't do anything or don't work. So I think we have to be mindful that at the end of the day, many of these businesses, their business is not making you healthy. Their business is to sell you tests, right? So yeah, I think, I'm not saying that they're not valid. I'm sure that many of them are valid, but it's also good to do it in an informed way. Hopefully with some kind of professional advice or person behind it, or at least some informed opinion as well.
Sure. Right. That's a good piece of advice. And what's something you've changed your mind about recently in genomics or in life in general?
I used to admire America. I don't admire it today, unfortunately.
Tell me more about this.
I am afraid. I'm afraid of the current situation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid of the democratic erosion that we are experiencing, because whatever happens in America, it affects us.
Yes, the entire world.
So, and I'm afraid to speak up. Even though I'm speaking today, but I've not said anything on social media. I've not, but I think the current situation is very worrying, even in my field. What's happening with the NIH? What's happening? The NIH is the National Institutes of Health, which is the biggest funding biomedical agency in the world, which is in the US and is funded by Washington. And the things that they are doing to firing scientists, freezing all the funding for projects, and what they're doing to universities, freedom of speech, simply because the government thinks something. I mean, should they not be independent? So I stand for the values that founded the great American nation. I don't stand by the values or the decisions that are currently being developed by a group of leaders in that wondrous country.
I'm sure this sentiment is going to resonate with millions of people out there who are feeling the pinch because of the same reasons you outlined. And I think there are so many philanthropic pursuits which were funded by the US government in Africa and a lot of other places. And now with the reduction in funding, I'm not sure if there's a reduction or they're completely cutting it off, the WHO, and there are so many other organizations who are actively fighting. Recently, I was speaking to someone from Sanofi and DNDi who are working on neglected tropical diseases. They're doing some amazing work, and they've got this vision or mission of eliminating sleeping sickness from Africa in 2030, and they're well on track. But if the funding goes, then you're going to see a relapse. All these diseases are going to come back and hound the region like it did decades ago.
You see, it won't harm the region, it will harm everyone, because we are all connected.
All connected, yeah. Very well said.
We can't, we live in a global world. We can't try to cut ties because we all depend on each other. Now, that's not to say that there's an opportunity, because I now feel, actually, London, UK, they have the values I want. France, we have Europe, we have problems, but honestly, wow, there's no fear here. The institutions work, and there's freedom. There's real freedom within the context of tolerance. I don't think tolerance and freedom are opposed, right? And so I think it's a great opportunity for the UK to lead, morally lead, because I've seen, I'm completely apolitical, right? So, but I'm just saying that the current way in which the UK is handling the current situation, keeping a low profile. We're not going to act. We're going to take our time on acting. We're not going to do, we're not going to precipitate. If we have to raise tariffs, we'll do, but we're just going to keep calm. And so it's been lovely to see and how, Europe is now really growing because of it. It's just that, it can be a little bit sclerotic. Yes, we know that, but at least the institutions are and the freedom and the accountability is still there, and the values of Western civilization still there. And when I see Western civilization, I don't do it I'm not saying on the sort of exclusive, because if it's something I'm proud of, I'm from Spain, and Spain is now become a net importer of immigrants. I mean, we have in just 20 years we have 15% of the population growth, just people born outside of the country, and they're welcome there. And anyone can be Spanish, and same here. It doesn't matter what color you have. You can be British, and so everyone is welcome here. And I think. Hopefully, that's not to say that this is the only culture that should be, that is the standard of truth. But hopefully, if we maintain ourselves open and tolerant, and hopefully this could be. I'm quite globalistic, probably. So so that's. And I think that this is certainly London and the UK is a good place to have a global mindset.
And lastly, what's the one message you would like every young researcher, policymaker, or listener to walk away with after this conversation?
I just want to tell you guys that we are all pressured for money. Life is really tough. There's a lot of noise out there. I just want to encourage you to put what you think is truth first. Pursue what you think is right. Don't give up because of lack of money, because someone else is putting pressure on you, or there are specific conventions out there. We have, at least in this society, we live in a free world, and freedom is the greatest thing that we have, and the possibility of pursuing one's path through hard work and through genuine, honest collaboration and sharing still exists. And I don't give a damn about the transactional sort of policies that we see. That is not the future. The future is about pursuing the truth, sincerity, and hard work in an inclusive manner.
That is very well put, Manny. It's very well said. I think those words are going to resonate with a lot of people out there, everybody, I would say. And that brings us to the end of our today's conversation. And every once in a while, you have a conversation that stays with you long after the mic is off. And this was one of those. Today, Dr. Manuel Corpas didn't just talk about genes or data. He talked about us, about people, about visibility, about fairness, about what happens when science finally starts to see the stories it's been missing all along. In a world that moves fast towards the future, where we celebrate progress and innovation, and he reminded us of something simple but essential. Progress that leaves people behind isn't really progress at all. Manny, thank you. Thank you for your time, your wisdom, and for the work you do, not just in labs and lecture halls, but in amplifying the voices and genomes that you've been overlooked for far too long. This conversation gave us insight, but more importantly, it gave us perspective. And to everyone listening, if today's episode moved you, if it made you think or made you curious, share it. Start the conversation, because the future of healthcare belongs to all of us. And it starts with listening, learning, and showing up for the science that includes everyone. You've been listening to Drug Diaries. I'm Kaushik Trivedi, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, Manny.
Thank you. There's always hope.
There's always hope.